Well, here you are. You're the first person to set foot on Mars. And your first mission is to explore a place called Jezero Crater. You're wading through the thick, rust-colored dust when suddenly you trip over something and almost fall. You lean closer to examine the culprit and recoil in horror. A skull is staring back at you. Who did it belong to? An ancient Martian dinosaur? A representative of a long-lost civilization? Now, this isn't a made-up story. That's what NASA's Mars robot called Perseverance would tell you if it could speak and, had consciousness. The rover had indeed found something strange, but it wasn't a real skull. It just looked like one. In reality, those were rocks that seemed to be out of place on the red planet. Right now, Perseverance is exploring the edge of a big, empty bowl-shaped area called Jezero Crater. Scientists think that a long time ago, this crater held a giant lake. Perhaps it was even full of tiny life. Since December 2024, the rover has been rolling down a steep hill called Witch Hazel Hill. It's an important mission because this hill might hold secrets about what Mars's weather and environment were like billions of years ago. Anyway, on April 11, 2025, Perseverance stopped to look at a special spot where two types of rock meet. One was light-colored and the other was dark. And right at that spot, scientists saw a weird-looking rock they later named Skull Hill. It stood out dramatically because it was dark and had a sharp shape. But the creepiest thing? It was full of little holes, a real nightmare for those with trypophobia. So NASA shared this discovery in a blog post. They explained that Skull Hill didn't look like the other rocks nearby. The area where Perseverance found these strange rocks is called Port Anson. Scientists think that many of the rocks there didn't originally form in that spot. They were moved from somewhere else an exceptionally long time ago. But how did they move, or what moved them? Now, don't get your hopes up. It doesn't mean we'll find space neighbors on Mars. These kinds of rocks are called floats. They are likely to have traveled a long way across Mars billions of years ago, back when the planet was much warmer and wetter, with rivers, lakes, and maybe even oceans. As the water dried up and the soft ground around the rocks slowly wore away over time, the tougher rocks stayed behind, sitting on the surface. Now scientists are trying to figure out how the strange holes on Skull Hill were made. One idea is that tiny parts of the rock broke off and wore away over time, leaving behind little pits. Another idea is that Martian winds, which carry dust and tiny rocks, might have slowly scraped the surface, kind of like sandpaper, and created the holes. Skull Hill is dark-colored, and at first, scientists thought it might be a meteorite that had come from space. But when they looked more closely at the chemicals in the rock using Perseverance's supercam, the results didn't match what you would expect from a typical meteorite.
Nope.
So, scientists now think Skull Hill might be a volcanic rock. On both Earth and Mars, dark volcanic rocks get their color from minerals like olivine, pyrozine, and biotite. If Skull Hill is volcanic, it might have come from old lava flows nearby that have broken down over time. Or maybe it was blasted out of the rock during a huge crash, something like an asteroid impact that dug deep into the ground and pulled up volcanic rock from below. What helps scientists in their research is that Perseverance now has some cool tricks that help it figure out what Martian rocks are made of. That's how we can learn where the rocks came from and how they formed. Lately, the rover has been super busy. In just a few months, it has collected samples from 5 rocks, studied 7 rocks very closely, and blasted 83 rocks with its laser to learn about them from a distance. That's the fastest pace of research since the rover landed on Mars 4 years ago. At least that's what NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab says. Usually, it can take months to find just one interesting rock in a crater. But up on the edge of the crater, aka the rim, cool and strange rocks are popping up all the time. Scientists are especially excited about getting these rock samples back to Earth to see if they'll show signs that life ever existed on Mars. But there's a problem. The plan to bring the samples back, called the Mars Sample Return Mission, is really complicated, expensive, and running into delays. So, for now, the samples are staying on Mars, waiting for their ride home. Hey, Uber! There's another rover that is currently working hard to help us get more information about our neighbor. That's Curiosity, and it might have found a clue about what happened to Mars's atmosphere from billions of years ago, thick and carbon dioxide rich. If the red planet once had warm temperatures and flowing water, what are the signs of all the carbon that should have been left behind? Now, normally, a planet like that would have carbonates, minerals made when carbon dioxide reacts with water and rock buried in its soil. But on Mars, very few carbonates have ever been found, which has been a big mystery. Now, scientists might finally have an answer. A new study suggests that iron carbonate, called siderite, may be hidden inside Mars's sulfate-rich rock layers. These layers weren't easy to spot in satellite images from orbit. That might be the reason why carbonates may have gone unnoticed for so long. At one point in the past, Mars's carbon cycle got out of balance. The rocks started pulling in more carbon dioxide than they were releasing. Over time, this may have caused Mars to lose too much CO2 from its atmosphere. It cooled the planet and made it dry and lifeless. The planet might have been still habitable when this happened, but once carbon dioxide started turning into siderite, Mars may have begun getting too cold to support life. The Curiosity rover found these carbon-rich rocks in Gale Crater, an area on Mars that used to be full of water. The rocks also contain a lot of salts, which usually form when water dries up. This supports the idea that Mars went through some huge changes, likely from a planet with a nice climate to the cold, dry world we see today. If scientists find more siderite in other parts of Mars, it could help explain where all that ancient carbon dioxide went. Even better, it would support the idea that Mars was once warm, wet, and maybe even habitable. But that's not the only discovery Curiosity has made. The rover has a set of special instruments called SAM. Now, SAM's job is to study the rocks, dirt, and air on Mars to learn more about the planet. And one of SAM's biggest findings happened when it studied rocks from Gale Crater. SAM found organic molecules. Organic molecules are special because they're made of carbon, and on Earth, carbon is super important for life. Plants, animals, and people are all made from carbon-based molecules. So, finding these molecules on Mars makes scientists wonder if it's another proof that Mars once had life, a long, long time ago. When SAM looked even closer, it found certain patterns in gases like carbon dioxide and methane. These patterns might match what you would expect if tiny ancient life forms were making organic molecules. But there's also another explanation. These molecules might have been made by sunlight reacting with gases in Mars's air. In this case, no life would have been involved at all. On Mars, strong ultraviolet light from the sun can break apart and mix up molecules, creating new ones that eventually land on the ground. So even though scientists don't have a clear answer yet, finding organic molecules is a really big deal. At the very least, it tells us that Mars had the right ingredients for life, even if we don't know yet if life actually existed there. Now, scientists are using SAM and Curiosity's other tools to keep searching for more clues.
On Mars, nothing is ordinary. That's why a single rock spotted by NASA's Perseverance rover in Jezero Crater has drawn everyone's attention. Its surface is covered with tiny spheres. This texture is both bizarre and weirdly, painfully familiar. Haven't we seen something similar on Earth? Yes, we have. Does it mean there's a mysterious connection between Earth and the Red Planet? NASA's Perseverance rover has been busy exploring Mars, and on August 5, 2025, it spotted something unusual. A rock that looks like it came straight out of a medieval armory. It looks like a knight's helmet forgotten after a battle. Or maybe it's the hat of a witch that crash-landed on the Red Planet. Researchers officially nicknamed the rock Horniflya. It has a dome-shaped top with a pointed tip and a rim that flares out. Its surface is rough and covered with tiny bumps. But the coolest thing is that the rock isn't just lumpy. It's made up almost entirely of little round spheres. Imagine bubble wrap that someone balled up and spray painted Mars red. Here you go. Geologists aren't too impressed by the rock's shape, but its composition makes them raise their eyebrows. Such little spheres could have formed in a few days. Chemical weathering, volcanic activity, or if rock vaporized by a meteorite cooled down and condensed. On Earth, rocks with similar textures sometimes come from processes involving water, and this is one of the reasons why everyone is so excited now. If underground waters had a hand in shaping the rock, it could mean there was a lot of water on Mars in the past. And water means life. Now, another cool thing about this helmet is that it's a floating rock. The term means that it looks completely different from those around it. Basically, this rock doesn't belong to the area where the rover found it. The best guess is that it was launched from another location. Maybe it was a volcanic eruption, or more likely, an asteroid smacked into the Martian surface and flung it across the landscape. Interestingly, this isn't the first bubble rock Perseverance has seen. Back in March 2025, it found another sphere-covered rock, and some of the tiny balls had holes in them. If you look closely at Horniflya, you can see a bunch of those too. That might mean they're what geologists call ooids, small spherical layered grains. On Earth, ooids form when calcium carbonate builds up layer by layer in shallow water. Picture a warm, shallow sea near the equator. The water is a little choppy and waves are constantly moving things around. That's the kind of place ooids are born. They grow like pearls in oysters. An ooid starts small, usually with a tiny grain of sand or some other speck. The water is overloaded with calcium carbonate, so every time the waves move that grain around, a new layer builds up. Over time, the layers pile on, and you've got yourself a neat little ball. Sometimes the center isn't as tough as the layers surrounding it. That's why the core can dissolve or even disappear completely, leaving behind a hole. If those Martian spheres formed in the same way, this might be the reason why they have those tiny cavities inside them. But there's another possibility. On Earth, the other way of ooid formation is biological. In other words, they sometimes start with the remains of tiny living organisms. Could the ooids on the red planet have formed in the same way? Of course. This doesn't mean we can slap a "Life Found on Mars" headline on it just yet. But the fact that these holes exist is a clue that hints that Mars might have had the right kind of conditions for life. Well, maybe not seashells and oysters, but definitely something worth paying attention to. Weird Earth-like formations aren't the only intriguing things found on Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover spotted something that looked like a bunch of tiny spider eggs. That something was made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. It was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of red Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's a floating rock too, just like Horniflya. Something once moved this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that it could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air. Then, those bits could have cooled down and formed those tiny balls. If that's true, the rock might have come from really far away. Another cool find occurred in April 2023 when NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon a travel book. Later, scientists figured out that it wasn't really a book, just a rock, but it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. In February 2022, the Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looked like little coral branches, but it was actually a mineral deposit, pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits form when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface. so they're not exactly new to scientists. But that one was unique, since it looked like a tiny plant or flower. In January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image, a rock formation on Mars that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had two distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. But let's get back to Horniflyer. Perseverance snapped that strange bumpy rock photo during its 234th week on Mars, and NASA even picked it as the rover's best shot of the week. Of course, the rover's main job isn't collecting cool-looking rocks. Perseverance was launched on July 30th, 2020 with a big goal: to search for traces of ancient microbial life and figure out if Mars was ever truly habitable. That mission is connected directly to NASA's Artemis program. It's focused on setting up a long-term base on the Moon. The idea is that such colonies on Earth's natural satellite will help manage and support the first astronaut landing on Mars. At the same time, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has his own ideas. He wants to send uncrewed missions to Mars as soon as the end of 2026. In the meantime, Perseverance has been busy. Its first assignment was exploring Jezero Crater, a site chosen because it once held water. After 3 years of work, the rover wrapped up its full survey of the crater. It happened in December 2024. NASA explained why this mattered. If Mars really went through long wet periods, Jezero's lake beds or shorelines could be some of the best places to look for fossilized signs of past life. Perseverance isn't alone either. 4 other rovers have reached Mars over the years. The very first, Sojourner, landed in July 1997. Then came Opportunity, which was expected to last just 3 months, but ended up operating for an incredible 15 years, until 2018. As for the bubbly rocks, scientists want to know more than just what they're made of. They're curious about where those rocks originally formed, and whether they lie in layers that could reveal how different materials build up over time. Studying their unusual makeup could tell researchers a lot about Mars's inner processes and how its environment shaped the planet's surface over billions of years. And maybe we could finally find out if there was life on the red planet. We just found the biggest clue ever that someone lived on Mars. Or should I say, something. Because if you're picturing skinny red extraterrestrials with big goofy eyes, forget it. The Martians we're talking about looked more like this, a tiny microbe. I know, a total bummer, but this could change everything. See that weird pattern on the rock? The one that looks like leopard spots? Experts think it was left behind by ancient life. And no, it's not like someone painted it, the way early humans drew on cave walls. These little marks could actually be leftovers from microbes, signs that some pretty wild chemical reactions were happening back when they were formed. And don't worry, we'll get to that in just a second. So NASA actually found this evidence over a year ago, and they were thrilled, as this was exactly the kind of weird rock they'd been hoping to see on Mars. They thought this weird pattern might be a biosignature, in other words, a clue that life was once there. That could mean an element, a molecule, some substance, or in this case, a funky leopard print pattern on a rock. But scientists were cautious back then. After all, you can't just go around shouting, "We found life on Mars," without being absolutely sure. It could have just been, well, a cool-looking Martian rock, right? So, they studied this sample again and again. And by they, I mean more than 1,000 scientists from NASA and partner institutions all over the world. And recently, they finally came out with a paper that basically says, listen, we can't find another explanation. And that's it. With no other explanation left, this might just be the best evidence we've ever had that something really did live on Mars. The sample, nicknamed Sapphire Canyon, was collected by the Perseverance rover in July 2024. It was taken from rocky cliffs along the edges of the Neretva Vallis River Valley, a region shaped long ago by water that once flowed into Jezero Crater. And we're talking like more than 3 billion years ago. Scientists believe that back then, Neretva Vallis was filled with rushing rivers carrying mud, sand, and gravel into the lake. When the water eventually dried up, it left behind the rocky outcrop where Sapphire Canyon was found. After collecting the sample, the Perseverance rover kept exploring the river valley to get a better idea of the environment where those rocks formed, and to figure out how those leopard spots might have appeared. That step matters because knowing exactly how the spots came to be is key to figuring out if the rock really holds signs of life. In other words, did those patterns form through normal chemical processes that don't need life at all? Or were they actually left behind by microbes? What the rover's instruments found is that the rocks in this area are made of clay and silt, which is exciting, because here on Earth, those materials are great at preserving signs of ancient microbial life. The rocks are also packed with organic carbon, sulfur, oxidized iron, and phosphorus. And you know who loves that stuff? Microbes. Experts think they could have used those ingredients as an energy source, and in the process, left behind the leopard spots we can now see in high-resolution images. Remember when I said these marks might be a microbe's leftovers, right? That's exactly it. Picture you're eating a burger called the Galaxy Burger that has a one-of-a-kind sauce. A drop of that sauce falls on the table. You don't clean it up, and a second later, poof, you disappear. Later, detectives show up trying to figure out if you were there. All they find is that sauce drop you left over. From that, they can tell exactly what you were eating: the Galaxy Burger. But proving you were really there is tricky, since that sauce could have ended up there in lots of other ways. The same goes for the leopard spots. Just by looking at them, scientists can already tell a few things. For example, the pattern shows the presence of two iron-rich minerals, vivianite and greigite. On Earth, vivianite often turns up in sediments near decaying organic matter, or in swampy, soggy wetlands. In a similar way, microbes can also produce greigite on our planet. When you find those two together, it looks like they formed through electron transfer reactions between the sediment and organic matter. That could be a fingerprint of microbial life, because microbes use those reactions to get energy and grow. So, going back to our burger comparison, the leopard spots are like the sauce on the table, the leftovers from the process of getting energy. But that's not the only theory. The team also spotted the possible presence of hematite in the rock. And if Mars has the nickname the Red Planet, hematite is the one to blame. It's a heavy mineral that can take on a reddish tone. On Earth, people have been using it as a pigment for paint for thousands of years. Now, scientists think the leopard spots may have formed when chemical reactions with hematite turned parts of the rock from red to white. That process can release iron and phosphate and possibly cause those black rings to appear. And here's the kicker. Those reactions can also provide an energy source for microbes. For now, though, these are just theories. What we can confirm is that those chemical compounds are definitely present in the rocks. But just like in the detective story, finding the sauce drop doesn't prove it came from you. So even though these materials are great for microbes to thrive on, it doesn't automatically mean this is a biosignature. They could have also formed abiotically, or, put simply, without the presence of life. Yeah, it could happen, but for it to happen naturally, without microbes involved, you'd need two things: high temperatures and acidic conditions. That's the only way those chemical processes could do their magic and leave behind the leopard spots. And here's the exciting part. Scientists didn't find any sign that these Martian rocks were ever exposed to high heat or acidic conditions. That's why I said they're stumped. They just can't find another explanation. So this has to be a biosignature, right? Well, maybe not. Because there's still a possibility that organic compounds could react even under low temperatures. And maybe, just maybe, we're seeing that happening for the very first time. That's why it's so hard to confirm 100% whether this is the handiwork of ancient microbes or just a natural process. So, in the end, we're still left with more questions than answers. Right now, this precious sample is safely sealed inside a tube millions of miles away on Mars. Hopefully, one day, it'll be brought back to Earth so scientists can study it in labs here. And while we can't confirm it's a biosignature just yet, one thing is certain. This finding by Perseverance is the closest we've ever come to discovering life on Mars. Honestly, just being able to spot a potential biosignature on the red planet is already groundbreaking. Another reason this finding matters has to do with the age of the rock. This evidence comes from some of the youngest sedimentary rocks we've ever studied. Until now, scientists thought that if we ever found signs of ancient life on Mars, they'd most likely be locked inside much older rocks. But so far, nothing has shown up in those ancient formations. Finding a possible biosignature in a young rock suggests two things. First, Mars might have been habitable for longer or later in its history than we ever thought. And second, older rocks might also hold signs of life, but maybe they're just harder to spot. Someday, our technology could be advanced enough to find them. This discovery also makes us think about one of the biggest questions of all, and that is, are we truly alone in the universe, or did we just find the answer? No, not exactly, but it's the closest humanity has ever come to answering that question. Hey, you know what would be pretty cool? Having a tiny helicopter on Mars that can buzz around and scan the environment from above. Taking pictures and looking for hidden extraterrestrial life on its own. At some point, somebody at NASA said something like this behind closed doors. Then they went and actually did it. Say hello to Ginny, one of the most significant scientific achievements since we first started exploring space. Back in 2020, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, packed a tiny side project onto the Mars mission. It was called Ingenuity, a flying experiment meant to test if powered flight was even possible on another planet. Just proof of concept, a test demo. The real mission was to explore the surface of Mars with the rover called Perseverance. In 2021, this six-wheeled robotic scientist about the size of a small SUV landed on Mars in a place called Jezero Crater. Scientists believe there was once a lake here about 3.5 billion years ago. That's important because where there's ancient water, there might have been ancient extraterrestrial life. Perseverance is basically a science lab on wheels. It can study rocks, drill into the surface, and stash samples in little sealed tubes for later. These samples are part of a long-term plan. NASA and ESA plan to bring them back to Earth in 2033 for more study. This could finally answer, has life ever existed outside Earth? Maybe samples won't give the definitive answer, but it's our best shot. Suddenly 2033 seems very far away. The rover has other instruments and testing tools that could greatly benefit future exploration of Mars. But the hero of this story is Ginny. They got the idea for this little chopper from drones here on Earth and thought it could fly around and scout for Perseverance. However, actually making it work on Mars sounds almost impossible. The first problem was the atmosphere. Mars has approximately only 1% of Earth's air pressure, which means there's barely anything to push against. On Earth, chopper blades bite into thick air to generate lift. Since there's basically no air on Mars, it's sort of like trying to swim in fog instead of water. Then there's gravity. Sure, it's only about 38% of Earth's, which helps a bit, but not nearly enough to offset the lack of air. To fly at all, the device would have to be feather light, with huge blades spinning like crazy, just to grab onto the thin air. Oh, and there's also the cold. At night, temperatures plunge to negative 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is approximately the same as the coldest night ever recorded in Antarctica. That's enough to damage most electronics, and batteries hate the cold. So Ginny charged up during the day with a tiny solar panel, then used that power to keep warm through the freezing Martian night. Every day, scientists had to hope that their drone worth $80 million wouldn't land under a hill in a shadow, especially since it couldn't be controlled manually. Mars is so far away that signals can take up to 20 minutes to get there. Imagine playing a video game where your character has that kind of delay after you press a button. Ginny had to be fully autonomous. All these technological technicalities, and yet Ginny did not simply fly. What was first planned as a 30-day test trial with 5 flights ended up being a full-fledged support mission that lasted 3 years. So, how did engineers pull it off? First, they had to make Ginny as light as physically possible, only 4 pounds. That's lighter than my house cat, but somehow it still carried 2 cameras, a battery, a flight computer, a radio antenna, and even a heater. Everything had to be trimmed down or miniaturized. Then came the blades, Ginny's most important feature. On Earth, a small helicopter spins its blades between 400 and 500 RPM. But we explained why that wouldn't work on Mars. So, Ginny's 2 rotor blades had to spin 5 times faster, about 2,500 revolutions per minute. Each blade was about 2 feet long, made from carbon fiber. Light as a feather, but tough as nails. And instead of sitting side by side like on a drone, those blades were stacked on top of each other, spinning in opposite directions. That cancels out the twisting force you'd normally get from a single spinning blade. You know how helicopters have that tiny tail rotor in the back? They need that because when their main rotor on top spins to lift the chopper up, it also creates a twisting force called torque. That makes the entire vehicle want to spin in the opposite direction. Without some way to fight that, you'd end up doing donuts in the sky. However, Ginny couldn't have a tail rotor because it would add too much weight, take more power, and make things even more complicated. So, engineers created a workaround with 2 large blades stacked on top of each other, spinning in opposite directions, which prevented the drone from spinning out of control. As for controlling it, Ginny didn't have a full-blown AI, but it wasn't remote-controlled either. NASA uploaded flight plans from Earth, but once the drone took off, it flew itself using onboard sensors and code. Basically, like a really smart autopilot. To stay on course, it watched the ground with a downward-facing camera, kind of like tracking its own shadow as a guide. And finally, the result was seen in April 2021, when Ginny lifted off the Martian ground and hovered in place for just 39 seconds. It rose about 10 feet into the air, hovered a bit, spun around a little, and landed safely back on the red dirt. It was short and simple. One small step for a drone, but a huge one for humanity. For the next 3 years, the team responsible was testing the limits, flying Ginny further and further. From above, Ginny saw more than the rover could. The drone helped map the terrain, spotted risks like loose sand and sharp rocks, and even found shortcuts for perseverance. It even saved the rover, so to speak, when its photos helped the team reroute the vehicle around a tricky dune. Ginny also made snapshots of interesting layered rocks, exactly the kind you'd need when you're searching for ancient life. Basically, once the drone spotted something weird or promising from above, Perseverance would roll over to check it out. And it worked way better than anyone expected. However, in January 2024, Ginny went missing. The drone was supposed to do a short hop, go up, hover, land, easy stuff. But after takeoff, NASA lost contact. For a while, no one knew what had happened, just silence. A few days later, NASA finally got a weak signal and pulled the flight data. Turns out, Ginny flew over a featureless terrain. See, it used its downward-facing camera to track movement, kind of like an optical mouse. No texture below meant nothing to lock onto. Mid-flight, the drone got disoriented, tilted, and during landing, one of its blades clipped the ground. NASA confirmed it. The rotor was damaged. It will never fly again. However, this is not a sad story. Even with broken wings, the robot is still useful. After Flight 72, NASA gave Ginny new software and a new job, staying powered on and quietly collecting daily data, possibly for the next 20 years. In a way, Ginny has gone from scout to ground-based observer. So, what happens next? Well, we wait for 2030 while we make more flying robots. The biggest one on the horizon is Dragonfly, a car-sized rotorcraft scheduled to launch in 2028 and land on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Titan has a thick atmosphere and low gravity, a dream environment for a flying drone. Dragonfly will hop from one location to another, searching for life in that icy landscape. It's like Ginny's big cousin, but with nuclear power and a whole moon to explore. The Project Ingenuity's success is already inspiring NASA to design better Martian helicopters. Some of them could be equipped with grippers to pick up rock samples, or even join up with rovers for full-on search and collect operations. Thanks to Ginny, what started as a tech demo could one day evolve into a fleet of flying robots crisscrossing the red planet. If you're scared of spiders, never ever visit Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover found something looking like a bunch of tiny spider eggs on the surface of the red planet. This something is made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. What if all these eggs hatch? Will hordes of eight-legged creatures swarm the red planet? Doubtful. The thing found by Perseverance was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero Crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's what scientists call a float rock. This term means that it didn't form where it was found, but somehow got moved there. So, at the moment, we don't have enough clues to figure out its background and how it got that strange texture. But that's not the only mystery. Something had to move this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that the rock could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air, and those bits could have cooled down and formed the tiny balls we see now. If that's true, this rock might have come from really far away, and it could give us new info on how big impacts move stuff around on the red planet. NASA thinks the rock might have just rolled down Witch Hazel Hill. It could have come from one of the darker layers up on the hill. We have seen those layers from space. Now, the goal is to study Witch Hazel Hill more closely and find out if those layers are made of the same stuff as the St. Paul's Bay rock. If so, it might mean a few things. Maybe there was volcanic activity in that region, or a big meteor hit, or there might have been groundwater there in the past. If this theory turns out to be true, there's a chance that some of those rocks might hold tiny fossils from ancient microbes. That's why NASA is planning to bring some of the rocks back to Earth in the 2030s with the Mars Sample Return mission. We'll get to study them up close and maybe, just maybe, find signs of ancient Martian life. Now, the funniest thing about it all is that it isn't the first time scientists have dealt with arachnids on Mars. Spiders on Mars is actually the nickname for a weird-looking surface feature. In certain places on Mars, you can see big dark cracks that spread out like spider legs. Some are huge, over 3,000 feet wide. From above, they seriously look like a bunch of creepy crawlers moving across the planet. These spooky shapes were first spotted by Mars orbiters in 2003, and they've been showing up in satellite photos ever since. At first, no one had a clue what they were, but now scientists think they form when carbon dioxide ice, dry ice, sitting on the surface suddenly turns straight into gas. That fast change causes gas to shoot through the ice and carve out all those strange crackly patterns. An even cooler thing is that NASA scientists have been able to recreate those Mars spiders in the lab here on Earth. They built a special setup mimicking Mars's surface and watched tiny versions of the spiders form right in front of their eyes. The team had been trying to recreate those Mars spiders for 5 years. When it finally happened, they were overjoyed. Back in 2021, scientists managed to explain how those spider-like marks form on Mars using something called the Kiefer model. The basic idea is that in spring, sunlight shines through big, clear chunks of frozen carbon dioxide, aka dry ice. That heats the Martian ground underneath, and the ice starts turning straight into gas. The gas builds up under the ice, and when the pressure gets too intense, boom, the ice cracks. Gas shoots out, dragging dark sand and dust with it, leaving behind those spooky spider patterns once the ice melts in summer. The team tested this theory using a big special chamber nicknamed Dusty. Yeah, that's a real name. It's about the size of a barrel and can recreate the freezing cold, super low pressure conditions on Mars. We're talking about -301 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers also put fake Martian soil in the chamber and covered it with CO2 ice. Then they used a lamp underneath the soil to heat it up, just like the sun heats up Mars. Their experiments worked, and little spider shapes formed just like they do on the red planet. The study also revealed something new. The team found that ice formed inside the ground too, and it caused the soil to crack along with the ice. This might explain why the spider's legs are so zigzagged instead of straight, like we might expect. Next, they want to keep doing experiments to figure out more about the Martian spiders, like why they only show up in some places on Mars and why they aren't getting more common over time. The red planet is apparently set on playing tricks on people from Earth. For example, in April 2023, NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon something curious: a travel book. Later, scientists realized that it wasn't really a book, just a rock. But it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. So it might not hold any ancient Martian stories, but at least it's travel size. Then in January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image: a rock formation that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had 2 distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. Another cool find occurred in February 2022. The Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looks like little coral branches, but it's actually a mineral deposit, which is pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits are formed when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface, so they're not exactly new to scientists. But this one is unique, since it looks like a tiny plant or flower. Now, the next discovery is even wilder. Once, the Curiosity rover snapped a pic of what looked like a perfect doorway in a Martian cliff. Naturally, people started wondering if it was some kind of secret entrance or maybe a hidden base for astronauts. But in reality, it's just a really cool rock formation. Winds and erosion carved away at the rock over time, creating a perfect symmetrical shape. Going even deeper into the past, back in 2018, a researcher noticed weird stick-like shapes in an image and thought they looked like fossilized animal footprints. Unfortunately, NASA quickly shot down the idea. Those tracks turned out to be salt deposits that formed in areas where water evaporated. You can find something similar on Earth too, for example, in dry lake beds. So, while it's pretty interesting that there's more proof that Mars used to have rivers and lakes, these tracks aren't evidence of life, just a quirky rock formation. Now, the next find is absolutely amazing. NASA's Opportunity rover found round, blueberry-like rocks on Mars back in 2004. But those aren't the kind you eat with your cereal. The blueberries you're looking at are made of iron, and they're evidence that Mars used to have a lot of water. Over billions of years, water smoothed them out and created these little balls. Scientists think that they formed when Mars was much wetter than it is now. The iron-rich blueberries are a pretty big deal because they show that Mars could have been a very different place a long time ago.
The red, parched earth under your feet is shaking. Large cracks are opening in the ground, threatening to swallow you. But unlike on Earth, these quakes aren't coming from within the planet. A threat coming from space is triggering them. Scientists have made a shocking discovery about Mars quakes. By using AI and NASA's InSight data, they found out that some of those tremors are caused by meteorite impacts. It means that Mars gets hit 2.5 times more often than we thought, and new craters are forming all the time. But the scariest part is that these impacts don't just shake the ground. They send powerful shock waves deep into the planet, revealing a hidden seismic highway and an unstable interior, unlike anything we imagined. This changes everything we thought we knew about Mars. So now, the big question is, what else is lurking beneath the surface? But let's follow scientists' train of thought first. They took Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander and compared it with fresh impact craters spotted by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's when they discovered that some impacts create a seismic highway through the mantle instead of being absorbed by the crust. Even though NASA shut down InSight in 2022, its data is still precious. The lander, which placed a seismometer on Mars, recorded over 1,300 Marsquakes, some caused by underground rock cracking under heat and pressure, others, apparently, by meteoroids slamming into the surface of the red planet. By studying how seismic waves move through the crust, mantle, and core, scientists keep piecing together Mars's deep structure. In the past, researchers already linked impact craters with seismic data. But these new studies are the first time when a fresh impact has been connected to quakes detected in Cerberus fossae. That's a highly active region 1,000 miles away from InSight. Scientists have discovered this 71-foot-wide crater much farther from NASA's InSight lander than expected, if we consider the strength of the seismic waves it produced. Mars's crust was thought to absorb most of the energy from impacts, which would limit how far seismic waves could travel. But the analysis of this crater revealed that, instead of getting dampened, the waves took a more direct and deeper path through the planet's mantle. This unexpected finding suggests that Mars has a seismic highway, which allows quakes to spread much farther than previously believed. Now, the InSight team will need to reassess their models of Mars' internal composition and structure. And then, we might better understand how impact-generated seismic signals can reach such depths. Manually sorting through the vast amount of data would have taken years. But luckily, these days, there are new tools, and scientists can go from tens of thousands of images to just a few in a matter of days. So, researchers focused on finding craters within approximately 1,800 miles of InSight's location. Their aim was to identify those that formed while the lander's seismometer was active. By comparing before and after images from the context camera over time, they identified 123 fresh craters to cross-reference with InSight seismic data. Out of those, 49 craters were potential matches for quakes detected by InSight seismometer. And after conducting some more analysis, the team decided that the 71-foot Cerberus fossae impact crater was the main finding. This discovery is likely to help scientists differentiate between signals from internal quakes and those caused by meteoroid impacts. Initially, they believed that Cerberus fossae produced a lot of high-frequency seismic signals linked to quakes originating inside Mars. But the new data suggests that some of this activity may have been caused by impacts, not internal processes. Another mystery scientists haven't been able to crack for 50 years is why Mars is split into two very different halves. But thanks to recordings of Marsquakes, they may have finally found the answer. Since the 1970s, researchers have known that Mars has two distinct regions. The northern lowlands cover about 2/3 of the planet's northern hemisphere, and the southern highlands make up the rest. The southern highlands sit about 3 miles higher than the northern lowlands, and the crust, the planet's outer layer, like a shell, is thicker in the south. This strange divide is known as the Martian dichotomy. There are two potential explanations for this imbalance. One theory suggests that an unknown internal process within Mars created the difference. The other claims that a massive collision, probably with a moon-sized space rock or several smaller impacts, once reshaped the planet's surface. But Mars' surface is extremely old. That's why pinpointing exactly what happened has been difficult. But now, a new study, published on December 27, 2024, has used Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander to figure out whether the cause of this difference lies deep inside the planet. InSight was positioned near the boundary between the northern lowlands and southern highlands. Its mission included recording seismic data from Marsquakes, which travel through the planet's mantle, the rock layer beneath the crust. So scientists compared how these waves moved under both lowlands and highlands. They looked for differences in the planet's deep interior. It turns out that the seismic waves lost energy much faster when traveling through the southern highlands. It means that the mantle beneath this region is significantly hotter than in the north. It's compelling evidence that internal planetary forces, rather than an external impact, caused Mars' unusual split. The research team believes that the temperature difference between Mars' two halves can be traced back to ancient tectonic activity. It once shaped the planet, but later stopped. At some point in the past, Mars had moving tectonic plates, like Earth's. As these plates shifted, they, along with the molten rock beneath them, could have created the Martian dichotomy. But eventually, the movement stopped, leaving behind what scientists call a stagnant lid. That's a thick, immobile layer over the planet's molten interior. If this turns out to be true, it might mean that the mantle beneath the southern highlands is still pushing upward, while the mantle under the northern lowlands is sinking deeper toward the planet's core. This ongoing process could explain why Mars' crust is thicker in the south. At the same time, we can't completely rule out the idea that an external impact created the dichotomy. Some recent studies suggest that a giant collision could still be a possible explanation. To solve this mystery for good, scientists will need more Marsquake data and detailed models of how Mars originally formed. By the way, if you ever decide to visit Mars, you might come across the hero of our video today, the InSight lander itself. It was supposed to launch in March 2016, but a problem with one of its instruments caused a delay. It was a vacuum leak in the seismometer. NASA rescheduled the launch for May 2018, and the issue was fixed in the meantime. But this delay increased the total cost from $675 million to $830 million. Still, InSight successfully landed on Mars on November 26, 2018. But over time, dust built up on its solar panels, making it harder to recharge. The InSight lander runs on solar panels and batteries, but it needs occasional wind gusts, called cleaning events, to clear dust from the panels. Unfortunately, the place where InSight landed didn't get enough of these winds to keep the lander fully powered. By February 2021, during the Martian winter, thick dust had covered the panels, and they were only producing 27% of their full capacity. To save power, NASA started putting InSight into hibernation mode, shutting down instruments gradually to keep its electronics warm. They hoped better weather would allow the lander to recharge and wake up by July 2021. In May 2021, The team found a clever way to restore some power by using the lander's arm to move sand onto the panels, helping the wind clean off some of the dust. But eventually, InSight was only generating 1/10 of the power from the sunlight than it did right upon arrival. In July 2022, NASA put it in low-power mode to keep detecting Marsquakes. The lander kept operating until December 2022. On December 20th, NASA announced that InSight had lost contact with Earth on December 15th, and the mission officially ended on December 21st, 2022. We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the Red Planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars, and scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds, so we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So Perseverance went to the Delta. The row wasn't easy though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just SHERLOC. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero, and that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found 2 more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the 2 rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay, but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grained than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these 2 cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out the Martian! Made you look.